Good day. Welcome to the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation's Web Talk series, Challenges for Jews Today, and today's special presentation on Jewish ethics on self-defense. I'm Andrea Spindle, Executive Director of CAEF and co-chair of End Jew Hatred Canada. CAEF is a registered charitable organization that for 20 years has been trying to shake up the Jewish community to realize that anti-Semitism is on the rise, and now it has indeed risen. Most Jews are now alert and anxious, asking questions and expressing their fears. What next? Are Canada and the US still the golden Medina for the Jews, the best places in the world, safe, secure, accepting? Did assimilation bring about the end of Jew hatred? Are observant Jews today who live outwardly Jewishly not afraid to go out for fear of harassment? These are some of the questions we are struggling to answer, while providing in-depth information from leading experts on a host of subjects related to anti-Semitism in its most virulent form, anti-Zionism. CAEF advocates for greater security, protective and educational legislation, and both the adoption and robust implementation of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. We need all the tools at our disposal to counter the lies and bigotry beset on us daily, primarily from leftist social justice activists and anti-Israel Islamists. What are some of the other tools that we need to ensure a strong, resilient community and our ongoing survival? Please support CAEF with the donations so we can continue to act on your behalf. Today's speaker will present options, make the case for Jews to stand up for our rights and to protect ourselves, not to defer to others and expect someone to come to the rescue, or only work to be done by paid professionals. This talk will surprise many, as Rabbi Cary Kozberg was ordained from the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in 1977. His message, in my view, is a wake-up call. His message is a Jewish message. For too long, we have been passive, uninformed by our own history and our Torah. Rabbi Cosberg currently serves as rabbi of Temple Shalom in Springfield, Ohio, which was where his career began. In addition to his congregational experience, Rabbi Cosberg has served as the executive director of Hillel at the University of Texas at Austin. For most of his career, Rabbi Cosberg's specialty has been long-term care chaplaincy. A published author and poet, he has presented workshops and seminars around the country and is nationally recognized as a resource on the spiritual, emotional, and psychological challenges that face older adults, their families, and caregivers. Rabbi Cosberg is a board-certified chaplain and a member of the National Association of Jewish Chaplains, having received that organization's Chaplain of the Year award in 2012. He's also a past chair of the Forum on Religion, Spirituality, and Aging, and has contributed articles and book chapters to many different publications. Although growing up in a typical Jewish liberal Democrat home, Rabbi Cosberg believes that conservative political values, such as personal responsibility, equality before the law, reverence for God and his laws for humanity, are most consistent with teaching and living authentic Jewish values. Recent attacks on Jewish institutions and individual Jews have turned his attention to advocating for a more robust focus on educating Jews in the ethics and practical aspects of personal and communal self-defense. He believes that in addition to having professional law enforcement present when Jewish programs are occurring, individual Jews who are willing and able should also be a part of an institution's security team. And he noted that he is the guard, the shomer, at the shul where he davens. The teaching session Rabbi Cosberg will lead will examine what Jewish tradition teaches about personal self-defense, when deadly force may be necessary or regrettable, and when less lethal responses are in order. Our tradition, because it deals in real situations and not theory, offers some important teachings for all of us if, God forbid, we should ever find ourselves in such situations. Let me remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded and the video will be available on our CAEF website on Friday and will be sent to all who are registered. After Rabbi Cosberg presents, we will pick up your questions, which you can write into the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll try to respond to as many as possible. Welcome, Rabbi.
Thank you. Andrea, thank you, everyone. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm really honored to be here this afternoon. I'm going to be covering a lot of material, and I'm going to try to go through all the slides in the time allotted. We're looking at these texts because I believe they show what is an authentic Jewish approach to self-defense. And I say that because we know that in our day and age, when someone who is Jewish expresses an opinion, sometimes it's automatically assumed to be an authentically Jewish opinion just because a Jew is giving that opinion. Um, I'm trying not to do that. Whatever I am teaching today is straight out of Jewish tradition, as you will see. In the discussion, you're going to probably see there are differences between Jewish law and civil law, particularly when we talk about what's called the Castle Doctrine. How the Castle Doctrine is interpreted or legislated differs from locale to locale. So if this is something that is of interest to you and you need to examine, it's good to check the laws in your specific area. I'm approaching this as a rabbi, not as a lawyer or as a psychologist. As Andrea said, we're going to look at what our tradition teaches about self-defense and why, what we are allowed to do in a given circumstance, what we're not allowed to do. All of this is going to be based on the tenets that our lives are sacred. We are created in the image of God, each of us. We are not the ultimate owners of our lives. They're mere stewards. And I believe, and I'll say this personally, that this material needs to be a part of contemporary Jewish education, both for children and adults. The fact that our tradition has what to say about this tells us that once upon a time, this was a subject that was dealt with in very serious ways. We know that we live in a time where we always cannot rely on law enforcement. In this country, in 2005, the Supreme Court decided that law enforcement agencies are not required to protect citizens from criminal behavior. I know that movies and TV usually give us the impression that the police are there to protect us. And even when we call them, there's a saying that when seconds count, the police are there in minutes. I will tell you that I was on a previous Zoom program in which a security consultant told the participants that rather than train lay people in security in the use of appropriate, responsible force, and you will hear me say that throughout this presentation. Whenever we're talking about physical force, be it with firearms or other kinds of weapons, the adjective responsible always has to precede that. Responsibility is key when responding to a threat. In any case, this consultant said that rather than rely on your own resources, try to stay safe. If there's an attacker in your synagogue, try to stay safe for 5 to 8 minutes. Now, I will tell you that in films that I've watched in training of situations where attackers came into houses of worship bent on killing people, particularly when there are older congregants, 5 to 8 minutes is an eternity. And to have to wait and hide and hope that you won't be shot in that 5 to 8 minute period seems to me to be a bit unrealistic. So as Andrea said, one of my concerns is that we as Jews take some responsibility to defend ourselves, if only because it's a moral obligation. To rely only on paid professionals to risk their lives for us seems to me to be not the right thing to do. In any case, we're going to go to the first slide. folks, you'll see that the quote here, "We don't turn the other cheek the way we done before," it's pointed out to me that there's a grammatical error there, and I understand there is, but this is a direct quote. And the quote comes from the songwriter Kinky Friedman, who's a fellow Texan. In 1975, he wrote a song called "They Ain't Making Jews Like Jesus Anymore." And the second line is, "We don't turn the other cheek the way we done before." Okay, that's how a Texan would say it. And the truth is, what's been happening to our community in the States, in Canada, in Europe, certainly in Israel for so long, we are, many of us, and I think more and more each day, are understanding we can't afford to turn the other cheek the way we've done before. And we have to understand what needs to be done and why it needs to be done, and what are the texts that give us permission and even tell us our obligation about what needs to be done. Go to the second slide. The Torah tells us, only take care of yourself and guard your life well. So this is a Torah commandment. In Leviticus, in the Holiness Code, we're told, you shall not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. I am the Lord. Okay. So a simple understanding of this is that when you see your neighbor in mortal danger, you have an obligation to help that person to the best of your ability. Now, I want to do kind of a sidebar. When we talk about self-defense, we usually focus on the notion of physical force. We almost never talk about offering aid to someone who is injured. So I would say that if you don't agree, or you have an issue, or you're uncomfortable with what we're going to talk about in terms of actually physically responding to an attacker, then what you could focus on in terms of fulfilling this mitzvah is learning first aid, learning trauma medicine, learning how to use, let's say, a chest shield, or learning how to use a tourniquet, or learning how to use an Israeli bandage in case of an emergency. Because if someone is injured and you call 911, again, 911 is going to be there in minutes, not in seconds. If your congregation, you and your fellow congregants are trained in trauma medicine and first aid, and you have this equipment handy in your synagogue, in your sanctuary, where it's available, that can literally save someone's life. And in many ways, it's more important than whether or not you're going to be pulling the trigger when someone is firing a rifle in a sanctuary. We're going to be focusing on these two particular verses from the book of Exodus, everyone. This is from Exodus 22. The section that we read, Parshat Mishpatim, comes directly after the Parsha of the giving of the Ten Commandments. And we see that the Torah says, if a thief is found breaking in and is attacked by the homeowner, and the thief dies, there shall be no blood guiltiness for him. In other words, the homeowner is not liable. But then the next verse says, if the sun is risen upon him and he dies, the burglar is killed, then the homeowner is liable. That is how the text is understood in its simple form. But let's see what the Talmud says. We're going to go to the next slide. From Sanhedrin 72a, commenting on this commandment, Rabbah said, what is the reason for the law of breaking in? Because it's certain that no man will stand idly by when his property is threatened. Therefore, The thief must have reasoned, if I go there, the owner will oppose me and prevent me. But if he does, I will kill him. And so the Torah decreed, if someone comes to slay you, be prepared to kill him first. Now, the given here is that there was no such thing as property insurance back then. People treasured and appreciated and guarded carefully what they had because it was not easily replaced. A burglar who breaks in, that's the way he makes his living. And he assumes, particularly if it's at night, that the homeowner will oppose him, and if necessary, he will have to kill him. Reasoning that, the Torah says, for that reason, the homeowner is allowed to take the life of the burglar if necessary, particularly if the burglar is indeed prepared to kill the homeowner. Okay, and so the Midrash Tanchuma says that this highlighted phrase, if someone comes to slay you, kill him first, comes from Numbers 25, which actually we're going to be reading this week in synagogue. Attack the Midianites, for they assail you. Rashi's understanding, though, is that when there's forced entry, it's sort of self-evident the teaching doesn't need a proof text. It's self-evident that if someone is coming into your house to rob you and possibly to kill you, you have to be prepared to kill him first. But there's more. From the same section, our rabbis taught, if a thief is found breaking in and he's attacked by the homeowner so that he dies, there will be no blood guilt for him if the sun is risen upon him. So the rabbis asked the question, does the sun rise only upon the burglar? And they interpreted it this way: if it's clear to you as the sun that his intentions are not peaceable, then you can kill him. You're allowed to kill him. But if not, do not kill him. Okay. In other words, this is saying it has to be absolutely, the homeowner has to absolutely be certain that the burglar intends to kill him. And only then is he allowed to kill the burglar. However, another unnamed teaching taught, if the sun is risen upon him, there shall be blood guilt for him. Does the sun rise upon him alone? And here we have a different interpretation. If it's clear to you as the sun that his intentions are peaceable, don't slay him. Okay. You have to be sure that he's coming in, he's got empty hands, he's not armed. He just says, I want your stuff. Go back to bed. But if you're not sure, then you're permitted to kill him. Okay. Now, the reason that there are two different understandings is because of the way the text itself is read. Because there are no punctuation marks in the Torah text, it's read differently. It's interpreted differently. The emphasis is put on different phrases, and so they come up with the rabbis come up with different interpretations. One is, shall we say, more dovish, and one is more hawkish. Okay, and they do seem to contradict each other. They say there's really no contradiction. The first refers to when a father is robbing his son, and the second refers to when a son is robbing his father. Now, this seems a bit opaque. So the halacha says, if a father breaks into his son's house, the son may not kill him, because it's assumed a father would never kill his son, but it's not the same regarding a son and the relationship with his father. There are times when a son might not hesitate to kill his father, and that's the way the rabbis see this. And when we go on, and we ask, the question is asked, what about, is there any difference between when this happens on a weekday or on Shabbat? Okay, and we see that it's the same for weekdays or Shabbat. Okay, and they say, granted, the exegesis for there being no blood shed for him, as including both weekdays and the Sabbath, is necessary, because we might think that this case is similar to that of those who are executed by a Beit Din but an execution never takes place on a Sabbath. And therefore, we're told that the thief can be slain, again, because he is threatening life. This is pikuach nefesh, saving a life. The thief may be slain even if this occurs on the Sabbath. Is an intruder entering private property assumed to be homicidal? Next slide. The late Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, quoting the rabbinic text Tosefta, says that an intruder may indeed be assumed to be homicidal, even if he turns out to be not armed when he comes in. And the same is true even if there is more than one intruder. So Rabbi Feinstein says if someone breaks into your house at night, particularly, you can assume that he is there to kill you, even if it turns out he was not armed. Getting back to the Talmudic text, our rabbis taught that the biblical text, if a thief is found breaking in and is smitten means by anyone. So that he dies means by any death wherewith you can slay him. In any way you can do that. Now, the interpretation of and be smitten by any man is necessary, because I might think that only the owner may be assumed not to remain passive because it's his property, it's his money being stolen. But a third party isn't allowed to intervene. It's therefore taught that the burglar is regarded as a rodef, a pursuer, a potential murderer, whom even a stranger may kill in defense of the homeowner. So what need is there of the phrase, quote, that he dies? And it means by any means you kill him. So if it's with a bat, a knife, a frying pan, a shotgun, whatever needs to be done to stop him. And that's the key word, folks. When we're talking about self-defense, we are talking about not wanting necessarily to take a life, but if necessary, regretfully, having to take a life because the objective is to stop a deadly threat. I can't emphasize that enough. It's about stopping the threat. More. A rabbi taught if a thief is found breaking in, from this I assume the law refers only to breaking in through the wall or breaking a window. But what if he's found on the roof or in the courtyard or in the yard? The verse says if the thief is found, implies wherever he's found on the property. So if that's the case, why does it say breaking in? Because most thieves enter not by walking through the door or knocking on the door, but by breaking in. Now, I'm going to say that this text seems to imply that if a burglar is found in your yard and you're assuming that he is going to kill you, you're allowed to kill him. That certainly differs from many places where civil law says you're not allowed to do that. You're only allowed to respond with deadly force if the person is actually in your house. And that's what we call the castle doctrine. Okay. Most places allow deadly force to be used only if the person is actually in the house, but not if he's on the roof or in the yard, maybe not even in the garage. Okay, he actually has to be in the place where people are. Another teaching, if a thief is found breaking in, from this, I assume, again, the law only refers to breaking in. What about if he's found on the roof or the court of the enclosure? From the verse, if the thief is found breaking in, implying wherever he's found. If so, why does it state breaking in? And the rabbis say because his breaking in constitutes a formal warning. Okay, you don't have to warn him to stop. He already knows he shouldn't be doing what he's doing. And what he's doing risking the consequences anyway. Okay? Now, the question comes up in the discussion. Rabbi Huna said a minor in pursuit of someone may be killed to save the person being pursued. He maintains that a person who is actually pursuing another person to kill him, whether the pursuer is an adult or a minor, does not need a formal warning. So how does one determine when an attack is about to happen? Must certain criteria be met before a person who is trying to defend himself or herself, before he actually does a preemptive attack? To the best of our ability, we should know, is the assailant known to be violent? Should a warning be given to that person? Back off, I have a weapon, I will defend myself. The Talmud says that a warning usually must be given to an attacker who is about to attack, not to someone who's actually attacking. Okay, if someone raises a knife to you and you're far enough away, you need to, the Talmud says you need to issue a warning to that person that you intend to defend yourself. A preemptive strike must be given, may be given if the warning is not acknowledged, okay? If the person chooses not to pay attention to you, and this is the case whether the pursuer is either an adult or a minor, because we have to remember the intent here is not to punish the attacker, but to stop the attacker. We talk about not giving a warning. This refers to the person who is actually being pursued, okay? The general rule among the rabbis that the intended victim can make a subjective judgment in the spur of the moment and act accordingly without having clearly ascertained the attacker's intentions with a warning, okay? Why is that? Probably because there's a lot of adrenaline rushing through the person's body. There's fear, there is anger, perhaps, and there is the instinctive go-to biological position of, I need to defend myself. I can't have my rational mind necessarily intervening. However, when it's a bystander and someone who's seeing this from afar, that person who's not involved yet must give a warning to the attacker before using force against the attacker. So when we go back to the Leviticus text, do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor, okay, before you kind of rush in like the cavalry, okay, if you are able to stop that person, you have to give a warning, stop, I have a weapon, I'm going to use it if you don't stop, okay? A bystander is required to give a warning. To be considered a pursuer, must there be a known intent to harm? Okay, does the person being attacked have to know that the person is going to harm him, or is it enough to assume that the person is going to harm him, whether he or she intends to or not? Okay, Maimonides, following Rabbi Chisda in the Talmudic discussion, says yes, willful intent is necessary, and therefore a minor who doesn't really is not able to know right from wrong, he's not mature enough, is not able to make responsible decisions. According to Maimonides and Rabbi Chisda, a minor can really never fall into the category of a pursuer. Okay. However, the majority of authorities follow the opinion of Rav Huna, and they say intent is not required because, again, the purpose of stopping the threat is what's paramount. If punishing the attacker is the purpose of the deadly response, then intent to harm must be apparent. If rescuing from the attacker is the purpose of the deadly response to the threat, the intent is relevant. The person is in danger, and therefore whatever needs to be done to relieve the danger, to make the danger go away, that's what has to be done. And I will tell you that in the midst of this particular Talmudic discussion about defense, Rabbi Chisda gives the example of a fetus that endangers the life of its mother. And here we have in this particular section, one of the sources about when abortion is or is not permitted. Okay. Rabbi Chisa says, although the fetus doesn't intend to harm its mother, nevertheless, it is considered a rodef, a pursuer, because it does endanger its the mother's life. And therefore, he concludes that when that's the case, the fetus's life must be taken in order to save the life of the mother. A lot of stuff here, folks, I understand. So killing someone to save them. Shall we say, the following supports Rabbi Huna: if a man was pursuing his fellow to slay him, and the bystander says to the pursuer, he's a Jew, he's a son of the covenant. The Torah says, whoever would shed the blood of a man, by man shall his own blood be shed, meaning, save the blood of the pursued person by shedding the blood of the pursuer. Halacha from this says, if someone is pursuing a person he was warned to stop, and he didn't stop, a bystander may kill the pursuer, even if the pursuer did not acknowledge the warning. And again, when necessary, the pursuer may be killed even without a warning. It's from the Shulchan Aruch. The rabbis taught, how do we know that he who pursues his neighbor to slay him must be saved from sin at the cost of his own life? Now this is an interesting question, because this is not just about saving the person who's going to be attacked. This question has to do with saving the pursuer from committing a capital crime, which could cost him a very bad afterlife. Okay, so this is sort of in the category of the rebellious son who is killed before he can grow up to commit worse crimes. It's more of a preventative as opposed to a punishment. Okay, this isn't the time to discuss the morality of that, but just know that this particular section, if you peruse it, has more to do with saving the attacker from committing the deadly attack, so that if indeed he dies, his soul will not be soiled with this capital crime. What about using less than lethal force? Rabbi Jonathan ben Shaul said, if one was pursuing his fellow to kill him and he could have been saved, the person who was being pursued could have been saved by wounding the pursuer, but he killed him instead. Okay, he's executed. He's liable to execution. Now, the halakha says, ultimately, if someone was pursuing another person with the clear intent to kill him, it was possible to save the victim by inflicting a blow to one of the pursuer's limbs, but the rescuer instead killed the pursuer without making any effort to stop him with less force. The killer is regarded technically as a murderer, but he's not subject to judicial execution. That's according to the Rambam, to Maimonides, because he himself, the rescuer, he himself did not receive a warning not to kill the pursuer. Okay, Rambam is saying that the rescuer who kills the pursuer when he could have just wounded him may be liable according to the heavenly court, but he's not liable according to a human court. What is an appropriate response to a non-lethal assault? What do the other authorities say? Okay, the Rosh, Rabbi Asher, and the Meiri say the least amount of force possible needs to be used. Other authorities say a person responding with lethal response to a non-lethal assault is blameless, given the circumstances and exigencies of the moment. Again, because of fear, because of adrenaline, a person may not, it may not be fair to hold that person responsible when he believes his life is in mortal danger. Okay, so example would be if a person who has a gun, who is armed, shoots an attacker armed with a baseball bat or even a pocket knife, is that an appropriate response? Okay, a baseball bat is a deadly weapon. A pocket knife is a deadly weapon. Both of those weapons, to be effective, are distance weapons. You have to be close up and personal to make them effective, okay? A gun is not a distance weapon. Okay? So the question is, if someone is attacking you with a baseball bat but hasn't really gotten up close to you, are you allowed to shoot that person to kill him? And it seems that the jury, the rabbinic jury, as we see, is not of one mind in that. Is a response with deadly force permitted even when the victim is not in mortal danger, but still may be seriously injured? And here we see again a lot of responses. Rabbi Asher ben Yechiel permits a violent response by the intended victim or his relative, but the least amount of violence must be used, only enough to stop the attack. Rabbi Joshua Falk says permits a violent response by a bystander. Rabbi Joseph of Trani permits an immediate preemptive strike to a perceived provocation. Rabbi Isaac ben Sheshet permits a deadly response by the intended victim to stop a threat to limb or organ from which a full recovery would not be likely. Other authorities only permit an absolute threat to life itself. And you see at the bottom, everyone, I've given a link to an article about violence, about violent attacks, what actually happens when violent attacks happen. We know that there are people who say, well, why do you have to shoot the person to kill them? Why can't you just shoot the gun out of his hand or wound him in the leg? And if you take a look at this article, you'll see that that's the kind of stuff that happens on TV and the movies. Okay, we know that even shooting someone in the middle of their chest, center mass, with one shot will not necessarily be enough to stop the attack. Shooting someone in the leg will not necessarily be enough to stop the attack. Most people, even police officers, are not trained enough or proficient enough to shoot a gun out of a criminal's hand like Roy Rogers or the Lone Ranger. Okay, again, that's not realistic. It's not the way firearms work. Firearms have to be controlled. They have to be used responsibly. And the worst thing anybody with a firearm could do is shoot someone unintentionally, to shoot an innocent victim, innocent bystander. So is a deadly response to a non-mortal danger considered to be murder and therefore a capital crime? Rabbi Solomon ben Loya says it is murder and therefore liable to prosecution. Okay, if your life isn't in danger, if someone's just going to beat you up and you decide to kill them if you can, Rabbi Solomon says you are liable to prosecution for murder. Rabbi Emden says it's not necessary, the crime shouldn't necessarily be murder, given, again, the provocation, and therefore the person should not necessarily be liable to prosecution for murder. What happens when the pursuer becomes the pursued? Is the pursued permitted, the pursuer who is now the pursued, is he permitted to defend himself legally? Rashi says no, because when he became the pursuer, he forfeited his right to self-defense. However, Meiri, a later contemporary, says whatever occurred before is extraneous to the present situation. When the pursuer's life is in danger, he himself may defend himself. Now, we may have some real moral difficulties with that, but be that as it may, that's what these two authorities say. Takeaways. First takeaway that's not in here, folks, but I want to again stress, learning first aid, learning trauma medicine, particularly when we're talking about responding to threats to ourselves individually and ourselves to our congregations, preparing for attacks in our congregations and institutions. Again, those who are not comfortable learning more deadly uses of force still should look into learning life-saving techniques. Everyone should really learn that. People who learn firearm use or are serious about it, one of the first things they take in their training is trauma medicine. Because again, if the idea is to stop an attack and save a person's life, you don't just save a person's life by stopping the attack, you save a person's life by stopping the bleeding, okay, until the medics can get there. And as I say, when seconds count and 911 are just minutes away, those seconds are going to, how you respond in those seconds is going to possibly mean the difference between a person living and a person dying. Okay, so what we've learned from the text that we've looked at, a violent response to the threat of violence may be permitted or even required, because again, we are not the stewards of our bodies. We are the stewards of our bodies, not their owners. Okay, so what that means is that it may seem noble to turn the other cheek and say, I'm not gonna do anything I need to do to save my life. Okay, your life is not worth less than your attackers. Okay, your life was given to you by God. You are your life's steward, and you have a responsibility to do whatever you have to do to keep that life safe. An intended victim is entitled to make a subjective judgment vis-a-vis the attacker's intent and act accordingly, and sometimes a warning may be dispensed with. Bystanders may be required to intervene, but must be more careful with that before acting, and bystanders always must give a warning before acting. Now, let me say also this, that a bystander is only required to respond if it's a reasonable assumption that he is not going to endanger his own life. Okay, if he is unarmed and he is approaching someone with a gun, not a wise thing to do. Okay, not a commanded thing to do. Okay? To get on the phone, to call 911, to find some other way of responding, but just to go up to an armed a person with a gun and try to talk that person out of it, not wise at all. When a third party must attempt to intervene without killing the assailant, rabbinic authorities differ as to whether that applies to the victim himself or herself. If he didn't intend to kill the victim, he'll be exonerated. If he did intend to kill the victim when he could have merely disabled him, as we've seen, some authorities will hold him liable for murder and some will not. Any questions? Here we go.
Quite a few questions. One that was really relayed twice is the question about whether the IDF, which gives warning when it's going to bomb Gaza, is in fact following Torah.
Bombing Gaza?
Yes, when you know with the IDF's practice is always to give a warning. They knock on the house, they drop flyers. Do you think this is because they're following Torah?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I would not have thought of it before, but the question was asked twice. I thought it was a fabulous question.
Absolutely. And I don't know of any, I'm not saying there isn't any other army in the world that does that, but I don't know of any other army that does that.
Oh, I don't think so.
And that has been Israel's modus operandi in every incursion they've made into Gaza, as far as I know.
That's my understanding also. Are there modern rabbinical responses on responsible gun ownership?
Yes. Well, I'm sure that I couldn't quote you chapter and verse, okay, but I do know that there are Orthodox synagogues where people do carry, they're trained on Shabbat. I know of at least 2 Chabad synagogues where the rabbi not only has permitted, but has actively encouraged people to, to be trained. And again, this is not about getting a gun. Okay, this is not about, I'm going to say that again. This is not just about getting a gun. Okay, it would be like saying, if you need transportation, just get a car. Okay, doesn't matter if you don't know how to drive, just get a car. Okay, all right, we all know that if you get in a car, you don't know how to drive, okay, you are going to pose a danger to other people and yourself. A gun is no different. Okay. It takes a lot of training to manipulate a gun, to know how to use a gun, to know how to deal with malfunctions in a gun, to know when to fire a gun, to know when to put your finger on the trigger, to know when to unholster your gun. There's a lot of training, and it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone. So in no way, shape, or form am I advocating that people just go out and get a gun. What I am advocating is that we in the Jewish community not rely only on professionals. Professionals, we have to remember, once upon a time, were not professionals. They too had to learn the training, okay? And just because someone gets a badge and is sworn in, doesn't make them Rambo. They have to take training too, and some of them are better than others, okay? You'd be surprised how little firearm training the average police officer has. Okay. Now, in this country, in the United States, I know the laws for private gun ownership are more lenient than they are in other places. So the question is, again, in order to stop a threat, if gun ownership is not an option, then certainly other forms of self-defense need to be pursued. Okay, Krav Maga, Jiu-Jitsu. My suggestion would be certainly learn how to defend against a knife, but also know how to defend yourself appropriately if the person who's attacking you doesn't really care about the gun laws and does have a weapon and you don't. Okay, that poses a bigger challenge, I would think. Okay, if you're not able to lawfully possess and use a firearm, okay, and your attacker does have a firearm and is willing to use it no matter what, the challenge to the individual is greater in terms of how to defend themselves effectively.
Right. Are you getting pushback for your views from different Jewish communities or
I sure am.
congregations?
I sure am.
What does that signify?
Well, it signifies that Jews, unfortunately, are afraid of guns. Okay, and as I've written elsewhere, it's kind of amazing to me that many Jews who go to Israel and see young Israelis schlepping M16s and Jews with yarmulkes and tzitzis with 9mm handguns at their side. And they see young people in evening wear schlepping Galil rifles. They come home and they kind of shep nachas. And then when they come home and someone brings up the question of should we have armed security in our synagogue, they're just outraged about that. There's a real disconnect there. We're talking about defending our lives. Okay. Now, I will tell you that a couple of years ago, right after Pittsburgh, our community here had a couple of seminars from security consultants about how to make our synagogue safe. Okay, we didn't talk about firearm use in terms of civilian firearm use. We didn't go there. Okay, but somebody did raise the question. The speaker kind of skirted it, but one of the respondents said, "You know what? I'm a mental health worker, and I'm pretty confident I could talk that person out of using the gun." Now, that is very dangerous arrogance as far as I'm concerned. Okay, nowhere in the text that we looked at today, aside from ushering a warning, did the rabbi say, be nice to the person, try to understand where they're coming from. That's not what the immediate problem is. Again, the immediate issue is how do you stop the threat? And how do you do it quickly so that you don't get hurt, so that people around you don't get hurt, okay? Your life is not worth less than your attackers, okay? We don't turn the other cheek the way we've done before. And that's something that I think we have to We may have it up here. We haven't gotten it down to our kishkas yet.
Right. Do you think there's any danger of Jews becoming vigilantes if they have guns?
It's possible, but I think, and I'm actually really glad you said that, because I'm gonna refer to the next slide. Thank you for doing that. What we're talking about is sacred work. We're talking about doing something that is obviously potentially very profane and nasty, and raising it to a certain level of kedusha. Okay, that's why the vigilante part needs to be really reined in. Okay, we need to be knowing what our limitations are. Okay, one of my favorite quotes, and I've quoted it in many sermons about, not about self-defense, but just about how we understand our obligations to God and to other people. And that's a quote from the movie Dirty Harry. A man's got to know his limitations. Okay, we, if we're going to be invested in learning self-defense techniques, we have to know what our limitations are. Okay, we have to know that we're doing this with God's permission, but also with God's limitations. So that's why I have these kavanah-ates. Okay, blessed is the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for battle and my fingers for war. Okay, this is the God of compassion. This is the God of justice. Same God. Okay, but there are times when we have to use our Torah knowledge for battle. Okay, the last one on this slide, we actually read this past Shabbat, the Haftorah. The beginning said, the remnant of Jacob will be in the midst of many peoples. Your hand will be raised against your adversaries. Your enemies shall be cut down. The end of this Haftorah says, it has been told you, O man, what the Lord requires of you, only to do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. When we talk about vigilantism, it's got to be tempered with walking humbly with God. Okay, we have to know what the limits are. We just can't go out and start beating up our adversaries, in a demonstration just because we don't like them. Okay, what we've been talking about today is about a threat to life and limb. Okay, not just because you don't like what someone says.
Okay, I have a couple more questions before we run out of time.
Mm-hmm.
For the purpose of self-defense, is the act of carrying a gun on Shabbat allowed?
Yes.
So,
it is.
So if you're not expecting a threat, but it could always happen, does that mean you are always carrying a gun?
Those people who are shomrim and who are doing that, yes, they are carrying a gun. They are also carrying a cell phone. Right. And they're carrying first aid equipment on them, and they have first aid equipment staged, in the synagogue. Yeah. In
Canada, the organization, and it's probably true in the States, that has advocated gun training, responsible gun training, is the Jewish Defense League, which, as you probably know, has been very much vilified. And I believe in the US is even a listed terrorist organization, although based on who they are in Canada, I would hardly think that. But they have been almost treated like pariah. They're outside the main frame. Mm-hmm. Do you have any comment on how they should be regarded and whether their message is in keeping with what you're saying?
Well, I think the responsible way of responding to them, and I'm aware that, they are vilified. Just as a side note, to me, it's very ironic that, the phrase "never again," that is a mantra for the Jewish community across the spectrum, pretty much, was coined by Rabbi Meir Kahane.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. So that's one thing we have taken from him, and we have borrowed or appropriated. And I would say that in the same vein, we take a look at what they advocate, and there may be some things that are appropriate. Jewish tradition says sometimes you keep the fruit and you throw away the peel. There needs to be a more careful examination of what they stand for, their tactics, It may be some of the things they say and advocate are really appropriate, and some things aren't. Okay, it's the same thing with firearm use. Okay, it's in this day and age, particularly for us, it seems very naive and even dangerous to say guns are bad. If guns were bad, policemen wouldn't carry them. Okay, if guns were bad, Israelis wouldn't carry them. Okay, and I know people will say, well, in Israel, it's about terrorism. But the truth is, if you're attacked by a terrorist or you're attacked by a burglar, you're still dead.
Right. Okay, just a quick last question, maybe. Do you think that the situation, this is a real stretch, I don't know if you can comment. Do you think that the situation we're experiencing today with ever increasing anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, is going to require that we have a permanent response, such as you're suggesting, that all of our institutions, not just our synagogues, what about Jewish day schools?
I do.
Okay,
so I think we are just like the situation with Israel. There is no reason not to be prepared. Okay, we have fire extinguishers in our house. Okay, we have first aid kits. Okay, just because someone is trained doesn't necessarily mean the training is going to be automatically triggered. Okay, but it's better to be trained. It's better to have insurance and not need it than need it and not have it.
Someone has suggested that maybe when the IDF folks, when these young people have finished their 2 or 3 years of service, maybe we recruit a few to come here and do the training, because they do.
And that's actually what's happening. There's a group in I know in there's a group called Cherev Gideon, the Sword of Gideon, that is run by an ex-Israeli military who trains Jews who want to learn. And there's another group in Los Angeles called Magen Am, the People's Shield. Okay, and that's a very extensive program of they actually have patrol cars that work with law enforcement there. Okay, but again, to answer your question, if people will look at the very last slide, we should always pray for the best world, but train for the worst. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi. And thank you so much for your presentation today. It definitely was challenging, enlightening, invigorating, and a little frightening, but we really do appreciate it. And I hope that a lot of people are thinking quite differently than when they joined this program.
I welcome anybody who wants to contact me, rebckaz@gmail.com. Happy to engage in any questions.
And Rabbi, if there are links that you want to share with us when we post the recording, I'd be happy to add any other information.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, stay well, and everybody, thank you for joining us, and have a good afternoon.
Appreciate it.
Bye.